Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.
Maybe not in freshman English so much, but certainly once you're out beyond freshman English, there are times when you're given a completely open topic. The instructor lays down very few, if any, guidelines and restrictions. And that can be terrifying, or at the least, anxiety-producing and a bit confusing, because we're not used to that. We're used to being told what to write about.
Most good writers spend their lives rediscovering how to find something original to say. Though your composition course is focused on generating interesting content for a classroom assignment, this is also a necessary skill for any professional writer.
You can sometimes fall into the trap where you could have a certain story happen, a baseball brawl or a contract dispute or some big issue in sports, and you could go back and get out an article that you wrote 2 years ago, plug in the new names and the dates, change a team or two, and you've written the exact same article. And if you've got loyal viewers or listeners, they can remember it as well. Didn't he say that a couple of years ago about the same darn thing? I think that's dangerous because it leads to a stunt in your growth as a writer and as a person.
I'll call the police, Bishop.
Verdict, I'm going to call the police. That's good. That's hilarious. You know, when it comes time to find what you want to say in terms of a sketch or even just an individual joke or whatever it is, or creating a character with someone, I am really big into never censoring yourself. Just throw out every single idea, write down every single idea, whatever it is, so however you work best. If it's just jotting it down on a legal pad or you know, every writer does it differently. But I think that's totally key. If you get into deciding, you know, this is not funny before you've even gotten the idea down on paper, well, then you're stopping the good idea from coming.
What they're doing law enforcement-wise with the increased population, with more students, you know, what are they cracking down on students on their bicycles not yielding to the stop signs and yielding right-of-ways and all that kind of stuff.
I like to give the reporter a lot more freedom than most assignment editors. I'll give them an idea to begin with, and then I like to let them explore and find out what they can out in the field and give them the freedom and the time to be able to do that if I can.
So the assignment is not just a teacher-based thing. It's also the real world gives you assignments. So part of what you have to do is say, how do I find my way into this? It's not just fighting the assignment and saying, oh, well, I'm not already interested in this, so how can I write about it? I mean, one of the real problems of a writer is you very often have to discover interest.
The process of finding something to say can start with an assignment where you're told what to write about, or a challenge from the instructor to come up with your own fresh ideas.
We're not used to that. We're used to being told what to write about. When that happens, I suggest to my students that they do several things. One is that you remember that one of the things that writing enables you to do is to help generate ideas and to think things through. That every sentence that goes down on paper doesn't have to be perfectly polished. So carry around one of those little teeny notebooks, the little spiral notebooks, put it in your back pocket, put it in your purse, carry it around, see what hits you through the day, through the days, through the week as you move through the world. Do you see something that sparks an idea? Keep that little notebook, jot some ideas down. Or as you're doing reading for that course or reading for other courses, as you see things on television or in the news, what comes to you? This is, in fact, the way professional writers often work, who have to generate all the time topics out of the blue in a way, or are given very vague kinds of assignments from editors and have to figure out how to make them concrete and specific.
One of the things that you might have trouble with is if a teacher gives you an assignment to write about anything you want to write about. Sometimes it will be really hard for you to focus in on what your topic is going to be. Before grabbing onto a topic and holding on to it and deciding you're not going to write about anything else, I would encourage you to come into the library and do a little bit of research first. What you'll often find is that the topic that you thought you wanted to write about, you can't find any information on. So rather than struggling and trying to keep finding things that really don't exist, you'll find other things while you're doing your research that could be just as interesting, if not more interesting, and then you can switch your paper topic and write about that.
Writing course is to get students to enjoy writing and to feel like they are writers. And so some students feel, don't tell me what to write about. This is awful. I don't want to write about your assignment. I want to choose my own assignment. On the other hand, some students say, when you give them a free choice, they say, well, I don't know what to write about. Tell me what to write about.
It's common to have an instructor determine your writing assignment. While this approach eliminates the uncertainty of brainstorming, the downside is you may be asked to write about a topic you're not familiar with.
When you have to write a paper about something that you're not interested in, what I'd say is as you get to know a topic, often you develop an interest that you didn't know you had. And also one of the things that I would say is if you have a topic that you're not interested in, to use the research process as a learning experience to having fun with it. Sometimes I use it as a treasure hunt. How much information can I find on the topic? I might not be interested in the topic in itself, but I might have fun seeing how many articles can I find, how many books I can find. So becoming a detective on that topic, and hopefully as I read more and learn more, the topic will come alive.
So I think there's always the possibility of creating things to write about if you realize that ideas are all around you, number one, and that number two, you as a thinking, active, breathing, living, hurting, laughing human being have 1,000 things that swirl around your mind daily, and that can be projected onto Sociology 101. That can be tossed into the mix of Women's Studies 9. That can become part of the grist of the mill of Anthropology 7. That's the trick.
So the trick, and it's not easy to do, is saying there is some aspect, there is some angle of this subject that I can connect to. It may not be obvious right away, but if you start from that belief and say, now what in my life, in my previous experience, sheds any light at all on this task that I don't know anything about, I think that's the beginning of finding your way into the subject.
Students and professional writers use reading to get ideas for writing in different ways. One common approach is to keep a notebook of ideas that will help you respond to the author's work. Another strategy is to read an author you admire and learn to emulate his or her style.
It's quite natural and necessary for a writer to be highly imitative and derivative for a fairly extended period of time early in one's writing life. This can go on for 10 years as you try out different voices. But as you mature as a person, as you grow as a human being, in a parallel way, you grow into your own voice, into your own identity. As you discard possible identities as a human being, you discard possible identities as a writer, and you become more clear not only about who you are as a human being, but who you are as a writer. And that's when your voice emerges, finally. But it can't happen unless you've gone through this process of experimenting and being derivative.
One of the tools you can use when you read is, there's many names for it, but some people call it a T journal because there's a T and two sides to it. Some people call it a double entry notebook. Some people call it a dialectical journal. But the basic purpose of it is to distinguish between your thoughts and the thoughts of the writer you're writing. And what you do is you take your ordinary notes on the left-hand side, and in that column you're writing down important quotes, the kinds of things you might underline even. And then on the other side, you're writing down what you think about those quotes, so your reaction to it. And it's a very helpful practice because when you then go to write your paper, you not only know what was said, but you know what you might say about what was said, which is the claim you're making about the evidence.
The really simple thing is read a lot of different stuff and write about it all the time. And to the degree that a 16-week freshman English course can encourage that or get that habit started, then I think it can make a lot of difference.
Many teachers and writers feel that developing a confident individual voice is one of the most important aspects of the writing process. As you find something to say, you develop an individual way of expressing your thoughts.
If we never used our vocal cords, we would have a very weak voice, and it would be erratic, and it would be fits and starts. And when we start out as writers, most of us have weak, erratic voices. They're uneven, unsure of themselves, inconsistent. But the more you write, the stronger that voice becomes.
Voice is honesty. Voice is letting yourself be true to yourself. You know, when I wrote Outside Providence, and even the comedy writer, you know, like people would say, hey, how much of this is autobiographical? And I would be saying, they say, because it sure sounds like you. And you know, my first thing was like, no, it's completely fiction. You know, that was my first reaction, because you know, you have parents in there and brothers, and I don't want, you know, to offend anybody. And you know, the truth of the matter is that even fiction, for me at least, is half autobiography. Most of that 50% is just that it is my voice. Really, finding your voice is just finding that honest moment, that honest perception. It is about being honest. And again, I think that's the key to good writing.
One of the best ways to discover your writer's voice is to write freely without worrying about an audience or a goal. To think out loud on a page while generating more ideas than you need for the final document you're producing.
I think generative writing is very, very helpful in trying for a student, or for me as a writer. I often use generative writing to figure out what is important.
Students will say to me, I have nothing to say. And I will say to them, number one, I don't believe that. But if you believe it, then I can only convince you that you do have things to say if I insist that you continue to write. And so I will say to them, we're going to write for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And the only requirement is that you cannot raise the pen or pencil from the piece of paper. You still have to continue writing.
Forget about trying to tell a story, developing anything. Just get it all in a notebook and then sit quietly, and you'll find that the little echoes will come trembling up from your consciousness or your subconsciousness. Stories will start coming. And watch out, if you have develop a kind of a Geiger counter that you run over your life, the landscape of your life, and it'll start clicking, click, 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 click along the way. A moment when your parents are not getting along very well, a moment when you fell in love, a moment when you fell rejected, click, click, click. Watch out for the clicking Geiger counter over the landscape of your life, and get that down on paper. This is the hot stuff. This is the meaty and fruitful material.
After generating ideas, it's time to sort things out. While many devices such as outlines, lists, or clustering diagrams serve to organize material, writers often realize what they're trying to say as they impose order on the chaos.
Ideas come to mind in rapid fire and not prioritized. And if you write as they come to mind, the prioritizing of the key elements of what you're writing could get lost or submerged somewhere. So after I've written in outline form, then I begin to prioritize when I would like different categories aligned in the book. But it takes a lot of, arrow goes up to here and this arrow comes down here, that kind of thing, to get it all reframed and in place.
I remember one young man saying to me, his chief problem in writing was that he diverged from his outline. And I sort of looked at him and I said, I don't consider that a fault. An outline should be a thinking thing. The best kinds of outlines can actually occur after you have written something. I call that a skeleton outline. On your computer, you can open up 2 windows. You can have your essay on one side, and then on the other side, you can just sort of say one sentence, this paragraph. Go to the next. That also helps with paragraphs, obviously. The next sentence is this. And then try to put some kind of a connecting idea between the two. And see, and you go through the whole essay like that and make some connecting ideas, and you begin to realize perhaps where the connections are not working, where things are not following, where maybe things are out of order. Oh, I should have said this before this. And so it takes you away from the words a little bit and allows you to get to sort of bring the structure to the foreground.
My approach probably has changed over the years. I used to teach outlining as the way to do it. Now I would train new teachers to present a variety of methods for planning. Some people may outline. As a writer, most of the time I have to outline. But I know other people who don't need to do it that way, who can do the clustering or who can do list. So I think we need to introduce to students the variety and ask students to think about what one or two ways. And it may be that different kinds of writing dictate that they use a different method. What works best for them?
Oh, I think the need to outline and the need to rewrite everything, that the first draft is really just a test of what you know, and that you have to prepare yourself to be doing multiple drafts, and that goes on here through the editing process exactly like it did when you were in the college classroom.
Though it's tempting to just get an assignment over with, your early draft should merely be the start of coming up with ideas. Many writers and teachers suggest the final revision is when the really important ideas emerge.
One thing that I'm really finding is that students have no idea what revision is. They really don't realize that revision is rethinking. That is a perfect first draft. But they're handing in first drafts. That's why writing centers are so great, because a writing center basically pushes a student to rewrite, rethink, and that's revision.
I think you can tell a newer writer from the writers that have been here longer is that you are much more willing to cut. And the thing is, even if it's a great joke, you know that you're writing 3 more sketches next week, so just put it in something else. The thing is, it's like, even though the cake is really good, 4 pieces is going to make you sick. So just eat 1. And it's the same thing with, you know, however genius the joke is or however profound the thought is, 1 is going to be better than 6 every time.
No matter what form you're working in, when you start doing it, you're afraid to revise. And it makes you afraid to write. If you're afraid to revise, you're afraid to write. You know, I think that's true of any kind of writing. In commercial writing, you're revising all the way to the very end of the process. You know, I mean, one of the things that really happens here, and it happens in all kinds of writing, is things don't work. You know, you shoot a bunch of film, you cut it together the way you planned, it doesn't work. And you've got to be able to sometimes not just rewrite a line or two, but to step back and go, we have to make sense of something that doesn't make any sense. And you know, we can't continue going down the 1 or 2 roads that we were going down before to make that sense. We have to step way back. You know, we have to write like a whole new voice on top of this thing. We have to, you know, we have to start with the thing that we thought was the end.
In academic settings and in the world beyond school, writers use research to acquire new ideas. An important part of finding something to say is learning how to blend or synthesize your own ideas with quotes gained from reading websites, magazines, books, and journals. Book learning isn't the only way to do research. You can also use interviews and personal experiences as part of the research process.
I think the creative process is always at work, sometimes in ways we don't even know. One of the reasons I do all my own research instead of farming it out is that if you are in a morgue, for instance, you don't know what your unconscious is picking up. You know what you're perceiving and you know what you think you're learning. But the unconscious is picking up sense and just the look of a place and the feel of a place. And later, that's what makes that scene work in a piece of fiction. I do think of myself as a journalist. Why would I invent a police station when I can go down to the Santa Teresa Police Department and see how they're doing business? I think the mistake many writers make is that they think you make it up. You don't. You report it. You go out in the world and you find out what doctors do. You don't sit there regurgitating old TV shows, you know, Dr. So-and-so and Nurse Ratchet. You go and meet a real nurse and see what her attitude is. What does she have on? They don't wear white anymore, some of them. They don't wear the little caps, the little buttons. But if you haven't been out in the hospital, you're there reproducing all the old bad TV shows you've ever seen. So it's better to go and look, go and do, and get the information on your own.
Lots of times it's better to paraphrase and then use the one sentence of a direct quote or even the one piece of a direct quote that really gets to the heart of the information you're trying to convey in that paragraph. The essay or the article, in the end, is your product. And it's got to be in your voice as much as possible. And what you're doing with the quotes or with the cited material is just emphasizing the argument that you are making in the story or that you are making in the essay.
Sometimes, in both the classroom and the world beyond school, the best way to come up with something to say is to work with another writer or a team of writers. Peer feedback is an excellent way to start revising a paper, but a team of writers can also collaborate through the entire writing process, starting at the brainstorming stages and finishing with the final editing and polishing.
This documentary, I had a lot of ideas, and I just started to log all the sound bites, and then I just started with this. You know, this is like one of the first scripts, and you know, you feel like, am I finished now? Okay, I wrote it. Here it is. I'm finished, right? Wrong. So then you go through revisions and more revisions, and you have other people read it. It really helps to have input from all different types of people.
There's a lot of collaboration, like when we have a drunk driving accident, one officer will take the accident portion, one officer will take the arrest for the driving under the influence. So we collaborate in that way, and then we touch base and say, hey, do you want me to put this in the report, or are you going to cover that, you know, and things like that. So we do work together, or in big cases where we have a lot of evidence and there's a lot of different elements, or maybe this person committed 3 or 4 crimes, we'll work together and say, okay, do you want to take this, or I'll take this, or I'll book in your evidence and you can, you know, worry about your report. And like I say, a lot of times there's supplement to reports where there's the primary officer who made the arrest and is going to be responsible for the main body of the report, but there's a lot of other officers that were at the scene and will write the supplement, and you bet there's a lot of collaboration.
I love getting feedback because that's the only way to get better. I can take just about anything if it's put to me, you know, with respect, you know, like an adult.
This one needs to be nice and quick. Yeah. This is the kind of piece you get used to very easily. Huh? You get used to it. Yeah. Can I get it this one? You know what I mean. You just... What's that? You don't want to oversaturate it. You just want to... Oversaturate.
Saturate? What, the puffs, or...
No, you I'm not talking to you. You oversaturate the sketch. Yeah. But once you get it, you get it. You want to get it.
No, Deborah loves it when I do that, and it's just part of our playing here. I'll do that for Deborah just to make her laugh. You know, it's just... You wouldn't believe how many ideas come out of riffing around here. Just tiny, teeny little fragments of things that, you know, some goofy little thing will just explode. You have this many creative people together, and, you know, you're in a room like this, or you're down on the floor taping something, and some speck of some funny line, or a funny face, or a gesture, with that many creative people, it's blown up into this, what can then be brought up here to the writers to be written into a sketch.
Most writers use the editing stage to proofread and fix surface errors. This is the time for the author to focus on getting the language right, and the thought process for brainstorming and generating of ideas is usually switched off. Still, the editing stage gives you one last chance to add an insight to the document just before the deadline.
when I'm proofreading, I mean, that's the issue. I find something that isn't clear, that doesn't say something as clearly or as definitely, that little voice inside me that said, no, that's not quite it, that I want to change. And I will do some of that, provided it's not, you know, extensive, and provided I've got a little deadline. But if I've got an hour to do it in, you know, I just have to, and I think perhaps for many of us it makes sense to just make a note on a copy for ourselves to say, okay, if I was going to do something more with this, this is what I would do, but right now I have to. So I don't think we as much finish a project as just stop.
Everybody makes mistakes, all of us, and there's a chain in which it should be caught, and I'm the last link in that chain, and if I don't know what the story's about and don't catch it, it's going to go out on the air. And so most of the time someone will catch it before it gets to me, but in case they don't, I have to know enough about the story to stop it before it goes out and question it. So if I get a chance to read a script before we come out here, and there's something in there that just doesn't fit, you know, I said, well, wait a minute, how can you say this on the one hand and say this later? Is that going to work? I said, oh, well, no, wait a minute, let me change that. And they might go and change it, or they'll explain to me how it works. So I said, okay, that's fine, it works, but the way you have it written here, I don't understand that. And if I don't understand it, they aren't going to understand it. So if this is accurate, write it so that it reflects it's accurate. So you have to make them, you know, ask them to make changes like that. It's all a cooperative thing. But, you know, it starts from the reporter or the writer, goes to the producer, goes to the managing editor, goes back to the producer, then it comes to me or Elaine. And if we don't know anything about the story, we don't catch it, it goes out on the air. And the people sitting at home aren't going to say, gee, that writer made a mistake. They're going to say, Dennis screwed it up.
We've got the one group of students who feel really boxed in by an assignment that's really kind of structured, and some people might say, now write about X, Y, and Z and do it in this way. Then you've got the other group of students who say, well, why can't we write about anything we want to write about?
I think generative writing is very, very helpful in trying, for a student, or for me as a writer, I often use generative writing to figure out what is important.
The really simple thing is read a lot of different stuff and write about it all the time.
Develop a kind of a Geiger counter that you run over your life, the landscape of your life, and it'll start clicking, click, 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 click along the way.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching. For information about this and other Annenberg CPB programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org.
This is PBS.